This is a full-frame DSLR. This is a full-frame SLR. This is an APS-C mirrorless. And this is the Olympus XA. Hello photographer, welcome back to my channel. It's Belinda and this is where we talk all about photography, from inspiration to camera techniques to editing skills so that you could take better photos. If you are hoping to look for the perfect camera, well, be prepared to be disappointed, my friend. But that being said, some cameras do come very, very close. So today, we are going to look in greater detail at the Olympus XA, and in the process I'll talk you through some of my thought process and what I was considering when I acquired this compact camera. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. A few months back, I was searching for a compact film camera on eBay, and the reason why I started this search at all in the first place was because, you know, people say that you always bring a camera with you, don't go anywhere without a camera, and I thought it would be actually a good idea to have a camera that I could literally bring everywhere. In order for this to be possible at all, ideally the camera should fit into pockets and also should not weigh so much more than a phone. That was my impression of what an everyday camera would be. Now, so I started scrolling on eBay based on what it suggested when I typed in the term compact film camera, but as I was scrolling through the results page after page, I started to worry, like, how compact these cameras actually are. The biggest reservation that I have has to do with the lens that's protruding from the camera body. I mean, however small the camera body might measure, as long as there is a lens that protrudes from the front, you're not realistically going to be able to fit that into a pocket. That's not to mention that you usually have stuff in your pocket. You're gonna have your phone, you're gonna have your wallet, your keys, so there are already valuables that should be in your pocket. So if I were to take a camera like this with me, I will have to carry it in a bag, which basically kind of defeats the purpose of buying a compact camera per se, because it's just basically a smaller version of typical SLRs, but it also comes with a bunch of handicaps in relation to its functionality. So if that's the case, I would argue that you might probably be even better off buying a proper SLR that comes with a full range of capabilities that you can ever want as a photographer. As I was on my search, I came across another extreme featuring a class of cameras that are super tiny, so they have no issues fitting into my criteria for size, but at the same time, they consist of a huge compromise in terms of their functionalities. Typical examples of this would be cameras that take APS film or half-frame cameras. Most of these cameras are going to fit into your pockets without much difficulty. But being able to shoot full frame is pretty much the bottom line for me, and so these smaller formats are not really an option. There were also quite a few listings of disposable cameras or reusable cameras, depending on how the manufacturer decides to call them. While there are many reasons as to why one might go for a disposable camera, for my present purposes, I do not see myself creating regularly on a disposable camera with a plastic lens. So in relation to this class of cameras, I knew that there isn't a point for me to buy them. Right from the outstart, I knew that they're not going to be enough for my needs, and so it's pointless to buy something that you don't need just because it's cheap. This, I must admit, is a rather complex state of mind. On one hand, I am willing to make some compromises, though definitely not a lot, and on the other, the images also need to be good enough for them to be worth taking in the first place. And I imagine for any camera manufacturer out there, this is a rather weird value proposition for any line of products, because I'm basically asking for a professional photographer's toy camera. At this point, this notion of taking a camera with you wherever you go starts to feel more like a myth rather than an actual possibility, until I found the Olympus XA. I have a feeling that Olympus, at the time of making this camera, perfectly understood that state of mind that I just described, which I believe to be a sentiment that's reasonably shared by quite a few photographers at that time. So in a nutshell, the Olympus XA is a 35mm aka full frame camera that comes with a solid lens, which is what really differentiates between film cameras anyway, and it comes in such an incredibly small size. Simply looking at these three factors, and if you think about it carefully, they are not really the most common combinations that we see, not just among film cameras, but really among cameras generally that's being built ever in the history of photography. And that is even before we talk about price. The focusing, or the sharpness, is something that the XA tends to struggle a little bit in. Though for me personally, I tend to think that while this is something I definitely will pay attention to, it's not as critical as some of the things that I've mentioned previously. Now, the ability to focus or the sharpness of a lens is something that I am seldom concerned with, because especially when we look at digital photography as well, we all know that the lenses today are able to return photos that are way sharper than what we actually need. And if your photos happen to be blurry, the lens is probably the last reason why they are so. I'm sorry to say that. But in the case of film photography, things are less straightforward. There are quite a few more considerations that we'll have to make in terms of photo sharpness. So the first thing is that you will have to go through the process of scanning or digitizing your negative and turn it into a digital file. You invariably go through some sort of loss of detail in the transition, depending on your scanner or your lab or your camera, whatever route you take, transforming those negatives into digital files. Based on my experience, autofocusing on a film camera is not necessarily the most smooth process on earth. You do experience some delays, and that is why sometimes, because of moving subjects, the photos turn out to be blurred because the focus did not catch up in time. From what I see, the effects of these bits do tend to compound each other, and therefore I did spend quite a bit of time researching on whether or not the level of sharpness that the XA is able to give would be satisfactory for my needs. So this really boils down to two things. The first being the lens sharpness, and the second being the ability to manual focus. In terms of the lens sharpness, as far as I'm aware, the lens on the XA is not the sharpest on the market when compared to its peers. For instance, the Contax T2 or like the Rollei 35S. I've not owned these cameras, I've only shot with an Olympus XA, but judging from the photos that I got, the photos do incline towards the softer end of the spectrum. It definitely has room for improvement, but it's not the end of the world, so the sharpness, as far as I'm concerned, is not really conclusive as to whether or not this camera is a good one. Now let's also take a look at the focusing capabilities, and specifically manual focusing capabilities. Because let's be honest, even if you had the best optics in the world, but then you can't really make it work for you, then your photos are just going to end up as good as the focusing mechanism that your camera comes in. And so in this case, as we all know, the XA is a rangefinder, aka you will have to focus manually. For some people, a rangefinder system might be a perk. For me, it's mostly a neutral thing. Like, I do not feel strongly towards or against using a rangefinder. Neither do I feel strongly in this case about the option of autofocusing. But the bottom line is that I do anticipate some situations in which I will need to manually focus, especially during low light situations. I would really rather do the focusing myself. Should that be the case, I would really want a camera whose manual focusing is really reliable. For that matter, being a rangefinder definitely puts the Olympus XA at an advantage. These to me are more like the cherry on top. First of all, many of the compact cameras actually do have similar specs, and so once you've kind of narrowed down some of the non-negotiables for your situation, there aren't an incredible range to choose from to begin with. But fortunately, in this instance, a 35mm combined with an aperture of f2.8 basically leaves very little to complain about. In relation to the focal length, 35mm is a really good everyday lens in my opinion. My intended use of a compact camera is to take it out when I'm not intending to take photos. I would take other cameras if I do intend to shoot something that's very specific. Where I do not intend to make any photos, I will take the XA with me. So in other words, this compact camera will have to be able to cope with any situation that I throw at it. In my opinion, the safer choice in relation to focal lengths, if you don't know what exactly you're going to photograph, edges towards the wider end of the spectrum. As to the aperture, I think the logic is pretty straightforward. Apparently, you would want a faster lens to cope with challenging lighting situations, and especially when shooting at night. Ideally, you would want a fast lens that would allow you to shoot handheld and without too much shake. Price is a consideration that's been lurking around in the background, but I honestly cannot say for sure because the prices in the second-hand market does fluctuate quite a bit. Now, my goal, if it is not already clear at this point, is to buy a camera that does the job decently at the lowest price point as I can. So in other words, if there is a camera that satisfies my basic needs, but also comes in a fraction of the price of other premium cameras, I would gladly take it. I got this copy of mine for about like £60, including delivery, so that translated into USD would be somewhere around 83 USD. I found this listing on eBay, and it says that the camera works well except for one thing, that is, the clamshell doesn't exactly close up perfectly, and obviously there's going to be a trade-off if you want such a discounted price, but for me, it works fine. This, in my opinion, is a super great deal that I am very grateful for, and I do hope that the prices do not go up crazy during the coming years or so, but if that does, and it does to an extent that the price advantage isn't there anymore, then the case will be different. But for now, I would say that it was a really great catch. So now, here is the verdict in relation to the Olympus XA. I am very much inclined to say that yes, the XA does deserve the hype around it. Okay, so once again, here are the list of considerations that we've talked about in a descending order of importance. First of all, it has to be a 35mm full frame sensor that's a non-negotiable. Secondly, it has to easily fit into my pockets together with my valuables. Thirdly, it has to have a decent level of sharpness. It doesn't have to be super sharp, but then it has to be, usable at least. Further down the list, we have things like manual focusing capabilities, and then we have price, I believe, and finally we have the lens specifications. Well, yeah, roughly in that order I would say. Purchasing decisions are never really a linear process anyway. Whatever your thoughts are on the Olympus XA, that aside, I hope that this video has given you some perspective as to what are the typical considerations that one might have when buying a compact film camera. Whichever camera that you decide to go forward with, I wish you the best of luck in acquiring a compact camera that's going to be the love of your life. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next Saturday. Bye!